We are about to get started, just waiting for the live stream. The magic. Okay, welcome to the Rebel Satori Annual Pride Reading. Thanks for coming out to our final Pride event of the season. My name is Greg Newton, and I am the co-founder, along with my beloved and tired partner, Donnie Jokum. We are the founders of the Bureau of General Services Cheer Division. The Bureau how's that? Better. The Bureau is an independent, all-volunteer queer bookstore, and we have been in existence since 2012, and here at the LGBT Community Center since 2014. We're still alive, going strong, thanks to your support. Speaking of support, I'm going to pass it back now for donations. We do rely on donations as well as sales to keep this machine going, so I'll pass the bag around. We especially encourage you to make a donation if you know you won't be buying any books, but you're welcome to do both as always. There's also a QR code on the back if you'd like to give through Venmo, so I'll pass this around. And anyone watching online can also give through Venmo. The handle is BGSQD. And if you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can sign up for that at the back of the room or on our website for those of you watching online. And that is bgsqd.com. And you'll get an email every other Monday about our upcoming events. And though we do slow down a bit in July and August, we're not entirely sleepy. We will have some events coming up, so check that out. And did I give our hours already? Our regular hours are Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7 p.m. We will be closed tomorrow for obvious reasons. And I hope you're enjoying Pride in whatever way, shape, or form you do, whether it's marching or quietly sipping a cocktail. Relax, enjoy yourself, and have fun. Before we get started, I wanted to read a land acknowledgement. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. The Bureau also recognizes Palestinian liberation as a fundamental part of our collective queer liberation. And we encourage you to take and read one of our cute free little zines, which our volunteer, Evan Burgess, helped us to make and put out into the world. We're very happy with, proud of. So please take one of those. They're free and they're scattered about. So let us begin with our readers. So our first reader is Brian Alessandro, who will be reading from Julian's debut. And I should mention, all of our authors, if you want to say a few words about yourself, what you'll be reading from, and maybe what you're working on right now, that would be lovely. So please give Brian Alessandro a very warm welcome.
Hey everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you, Donnie and Greg, as usual, for this. We're always very grateful. Happy Pride. Before I get going, does this sound weird? Does this sound okay?
Yeah, you guys.
Okay. Edmund White and his husband Michael Carroll have been very good to me for the past 8 years. We became very close friends. I adapted with Michael and Igor Kurash into a graphic novel, A Boy's Own Story, 2.5 years ago. And I'm very happy to announce, well, Variety announced it on Monday, that it's going to be adapted into a limited series. And it's going to be adapted by John Krokidas, who directed Kill Your Darlings, and produced by Daniel Dreyfus, who won an Oscar for producing All Quiet on the Western Front 2 years ago. So I think it's a nice legacy for Ed. That being said, I did dedicate this book to Ed and to Michael, among several deceased family members. And it came out in March, so when Ed passed away 3 weeks ago, it took on a new poignancy for me. And Michael and Ed appear as characters in the novel, as well as many other unnamed writers, because maybe those portraits were not as flattering as the one I offered to Ed and Michael. So they won't be named. So I'd like to read a section of the book that deals with their characterizations. The novel is about a social worker who writes a memoir that is published in the New Yorker that becomes very successful, and his agent encourages him to turn it into a book. And so he starts to meet with each disgruntled family member because the article sort of portrayed them all as villains, and he portrayed himself as a victim or a hero in his own life story, and so understandably they hate him. And so he tries to convince them to give more dirt so that he could expand it into a book. And it's also subsequently turned into a TV series by HBO Max. So that's what the novel explores. So this is from chapter 18. Marcel Laurent spun a strange story about the uneasy relationship between his family and country. Kevin had spent all day at the gym and then ordered Thai food for dinner. The young Parisian prodigy regaled us, that is me, Kevin, Ed, and Fanny, as everyone else were either on tours or holiday or writing, with the details of his new work in progress called My Parents Shot Themselves with Destitute Bullets. The work, like his previous 2 books, The Completion of Marcel and Those Who Cancelled My Father, would likely further his reputation as France's folk hero, an exemplar of the industrious poor, the virtues of farmer grit, and unexpected places regarding the poor and uneducated, we find sparkling intellectuals. Everything in France was class warfare, and Marcel had the biggest gun. My father was an ignorant farmer, and my mother was not much smarter, said Marcel, and so naturally they voted against their own interests by casting their ballots for Le Pen, much the same as your American hillbillies and rednecks did for Trump. These people don't know any better, and they are easily fooled, and so they elect the person who promises a restoration of old times, when the country was white and straight and dropping atomic bombs on other sovereign nations, the so-called Great Days. I don't understand your title, I said, to which Kevin snorted and Ed gave me a cross look. Fanny, reliably neutral, just shrugged and muttered, what's there to understand? Marcel, though only 27, looked to be in his mid-40s, ghostly pale and thin, with premature wrinkles and a sallow complexion. A cherubic beauty in adolescence who embraced the marks of old age too soon, marks left by cigarettes, cocktails, and precociousness. My parents, began Marcel, extra slow and deliberate, his roomy eyes encased within dark bags, speaking to me as if I were a moron, and maybe I was, ignorant and destitute by voting for Le Pen, that is, voting again against their own interest, ended up shooting only themselves as in the foot, as you say, or cutting off their noses despite their faces. I get it now, I said. Of course you get it, Julian, said Kevin, putting a warm hand on my leg. You're currently living it. Well, I sat up and smiled through gritted teeth. My circumstances are different from Marcel's. Only as far as countries go, said Ed. You're both poor boys from proletariat families who have made yourselves into erudite writers and have written books about those families, and now those families hate you both. Quite similar. I had never thought of my family as proletariat, or myself as erudite for that matter, but Edward was the grandmaster of observation and concise assessment, so I couldn't argue his usage of terms. Julian, began Marcel, how did you wrong your family? By telling the truth? I guess there is such a thing as too much truth, I said, finishing my glass of Cabernet, which Kevin refilled immediately and with urgency. Nonsense, said Marcel. There can never be too much truth. We should all say the truth again and again, over and over, until we ache from knowing it. That's much to an ascetic way of life, said Fanny. We're not monks. We don't need to be so Spartan about it. There should be some mystery, some romance, some tall tale telling even. Tall tale telling, Fanny quipped Kevin with a chuckle. Yeah, tall tale telling. What's wrong with that, Kevin? Let the fabulists entertain us. Why not? Kevin giggled into his bourbon and burped. Well, began Edward, I think, like a good memoir or novel, life should be a mix of fact and fiction, and let the lines blur, I say. By keeping it unclear, though, Marcel said, stretching his lanky body and yawning, that is where the troubles start. Kevin planned the dinner so early that Ed and Fanny could make the 8 p.m. showing of Marietta and Elena, a Castilian lesbian melodrama set in 1930s Sevilla with Franco's genocide in the background, at the theater around the corner. Though we'd been invited to join them, Kevin insisted that Marcel and I go with him to the Starfish. We all walked Ed and Fanny to the theater before heading to the bar. New York could be impatient with slow-moving elders, despite their intellectual prowess and professional victories. In under an hour, we were all drinking in the back room of the bar, from curated buckets of galvanized steel plumed bouquets of kitschy fake flowers encased under oversized glass cloches. Kevin joked about how the owner was trying to spruce up the place and appeal to a higher pedigree of customer, those who'd spend premiums on multiple bottles of prohibited French wine and top-shelf liquor. He laughed at these efforts. "We're all here to get shit-faced fast and fuck hard," said Kevin, slurring and blushing, "and then come back again tomorrow night and do it again. I mean, you know your clientele, am I right?" Marcel and I were not as incoherent as Kevin, though in our boozy fog we laughed and agreed. Soon we were joined by an excitable young man, maybe 20 or younger, named Milo Riddle from Tampa, Florida, he said. The intrusive boy had bloodshot eyes, a red nose, and spoke with a nervy cadence. I was sure he'd been doing lines of coke before appearing. "You're Marcel Laurent, and you're Kevin Tracy, of course, married to the illustrious Edward Gray." "You've identified us," Kevin Fogg asked, touching my stomach. "Kill him." "It would be my honor," shouted Milo in a howl that was endearing in its awkwardness. "Milo," said Kevin in a slow, rumbling drawl, intimating irritation, "we've met many times already. You do this every Thursday night. Do you just keep forgetting, or is this shtick?" Milo, who had apparently known Kevin well, disregarded the insult and continued his blue streak, rambling about his rich and probably queer Uncle Ken back in Tallahassee, who'd spoiled him on first editions of old books. Milo had whipped out his smartphone and began sharing photos of his library back in Tampa. "Here are Ed's first editions, a whole shelf, back home in swampland." Milo showed Kevin a montage of Ed's books, their shop-worn spines standing in formation like weary but preserved soldiers, something I'd find out later he'd done every Thursday night. "They're all here," said Milo, breathless, sweaty. "A Young Man's Private Tale, The Gorgeous Attic is Lonely, and The Goodbye Sonata, and the memoir, My Incarnations, all here." Kevin yawned and nodded, both scowling and smirking at the same time. "I even have some of your cohort's first runs. I mean, Fanny's, Suleiman's, Cullen's, Fenn's, the whole coterie, and now even yours, Marcel's." Milo was as knowledgeable about contemporary writers as he was grateful to suddenly be in their company. "Why don't you sit, Milo," said Marcel, calm, if not curt. Milo sat, but gesticulated with greater ardor when he spoke. He swung his arms carelessly when acting out scenarios involving the family he'd abandoned in the swamps, left to the palmettos, as he put it. On several occasions, he'd inadvertently hit the bar back as he attempted to clear out table, snarling and muttering under his breath each time, "Watch it, twat." "But what I really wanted to share with you all is the plot of my new novel," Milo continued, hopped up on our attention and oblivious to the annoyance of the stranger he'd struck, "and who knows, maybe I can get some blurbs out of all of you sometime. No pressure or anything." Milo began his pitch about his novel called Group Shows, a satire about the art world. He'd acknowledged that we've had so many of those in the past few years, low-hanging fruit, but this one promised to be absurdist and extreme, like maybe Jonathan Swift. It's about this thing he called gunshot chic. Wealthy socialites pay to have themselves shot as status symbols. It's like an underground cottage industry. Those who die, and of course some of them actually do, accidentally, are exhibited in a museum like a piece of art. The beauty of carnage, he called it.
Hi everyone. Author Tom Cardamone, author of such books as The Green Thumb, The Lurid Sea, and Pacific Rimming, is reading from Paul Reed's Facing It, a novel of AIDS. Welcome, Tom.
I knew it. Hello, everybody. How are you guys? So unfortunately, some bad news. James McCord and Vincent Berger were not able to make it today. So if you were here to see them, our apologies. But we do have their books available. This is the first time A Comfortable Corner has been in print in, I would say, 40 years. So it's a beautiful edition, and his postscript is divine. So if you want to honor him, please grab a book. I'm going to read a very small segment from Paul Reed's facing it. This is a novel of AIDS. This is from 1984. I believe this is the first book ever written about AIDS. We publish one AIDS-related title every year, so I'd like to take this opportunity to announce that this December we will be coming out with Bo Houston's Remember Me, which is a fantastic novel, his last, from Paul Reed. And then the dream returned. It was something of a nightmare, something of a Kafkaesque world of grotesque. There was no theme, no special fear, and he could name. When he'd waken, the uneasiness would flee, and he wouldn't remember the details, the odd rooms dimly lit, the silhouettes of men and women passing along some sort of dark hallway, peering, no leering into the teeny rooms. What was in those rooms? The dream seemed incomplete without the knowledge of what those little rooms contained. But Andy couldn't see around the crowds at the doorways. He couldn't make out what was happening in those rooms. Then the scene pulled away again, just the silhouettes passing in the hall. He tossed and turned on the bed, his sleep restless, disturbed. He faded in and out of sleep and near sleep. The summer night was hot, he was sweating. Thank you.
Okay, our next reader is Larry Gloss, reading from Beatitude.
Thanks, everyone. When you write a book, the first thing that your friends ask you is, what's your book about? And for the sorry. When you write a book, first thing your friends ask you is, what is your book about? And for the longest time, I said my book is about unrequited love. But the longer your book is out, the more you get to know your book and figure out what it actually is about. It is about unrequited love, but it's really more about learning that you can love someone very, very much, and they cannot, for whatever reasons, love you back in the same way. There's two sort of parallel relationships in the book. There's a present storyline, and there's a past storyline. And I'm going to read sort of the denouement of the past storyline, in which the narrator of the book hopefully learns something, but let's find out if he does. The narrator's name is Harry, and his current infatuation is Matteo. They've lived together for the last 2 years. The night after Matteo and I went home together, everything returned to the status quo. Our night together was just that, one night. As much as I wanted to read something more into it, in the end, there was nothing more to be read into it. We would never spend another night together again. Matteo was just as frustrated as I was. Frustrated that he didn't feel for me what I felt for him. Frustrated that we didn't want the same thing. What we had, he felt, was good. We lived in the same house together, we hung out together, and every once in a great while we slept in the same bed together. For my part, I couldn't understand how he could want all of that and not want the one thing I thought was missing. Months passed, seasons changed, but the situation between us did not. It only grew more unstable. Matteo had slipped away from everything he had aspired to be when we first met. He was an unemployed drunk who slept with strangers nearly every night. No amount of alcohol could make him forget it for a minute. As for me, I had slipped away too, away from everything that I had ever been. I was the pathetic, dejected romantic who continued to look out for Matteo to the exclusion of almost anything else, still hoping for something that would never be. We were both on the edge, wound up and waiting to explode. I came home from work one Friday to find him finishing the last bottle in the six-pack. He greeted me as I walked in the door. "Harry, happy hour started early today," he yelled, stumbling towards me. I put my arms out to break his fall, and he smiled as he fell into them, taking my hands in his. "Shall we dance?" he asked, slurring his words and tripping over his own feet as he attempted an awkward two-step. "Anyway," he said, giving up and falling back on the couch, "get changed. The night is young and I need to get drunk." I looked him over. He reeked from 6 feet away. "How about dinner?" I suggested. "I think you need to eat." His face contorted. What I need, he said angrily, is for you not to tell me what I need. He staggered for a moment, caught his balance, and then looked at me with a huge grin. Now you're going to come with me, or do I have to get drunk all by myself? Though I knew it was a mistake, I threw on a long-sleeve t-shirt and a pair of jeans, and we headed out. It was raining steadily when we pulled away. Mateo had been flagged from our usual bar, and he wanted to go to a place where nobody knew his name. He directed me to the turnpike and then to a club he'd heard about in New Hope, a small village of cafes and galleries an hour north of Philadelphia. At the club, Mateo ordered us 2 buds and 2 shots of Jägermeister, immediately downing his shot and then mine. Mateo, I began, maybe you should, but before he could say anything else, he picked up his mug of beer and cut me off. Don't tell me what I should or shouldn't do, he snapped. His face clouded over and then cleared. Get yourself a shot, Harry. I'm too up on you. I'll be back. With that, he was gone. I stood at the bar, not drinking my beer, wondering what the night would bring. I found out about 20 minutes later when Mateo returned with a young guy on his arm. He told me the guy's name, but I didn't hear it. Listen, Harry, he said, I know we just got here and I'm awfully sorry to do this to you, but I'm going to hang out with my new friend if you don't mind. No, I don't mind, I said, trying to sound indifferent. Mateo detected the undertone in my reply. Sounds like you do mind. He glared at me for a moment and then broke into an exaggerated smile. Good old Harry. He leaned over and whispered in my ear, do you have a 20 I could borrow? The last thing Mateo needed, I decided, was to keep drinking. Was it up to me to make that decision? I didn't know. I only knew that he was hurting and I didn't want to hurt him anymore. No, Mateo, I'm not giving you any money. He studied me for a moment, trying to determine whether I was joking or serious. Mateo, you've had enough to drink, more than enough. I'm going home. Come with me, we'll get something to eat. He realized I was serious as I stood to go. I'm not going anywhere, he yelled. I don't want to eat, I want to drink. I knew there was no change in his mind in this condition, and reluctantly I headed for the door. Just as I reached for the handle, however, Mateo grabbed me by the shoulder, spun me around, and slammed me up against the wall. Are you going to give me some money or what? He screamed. I stared at him, undone and unrecognizable, his ruggedly handsome face contorted by too much pain and too much alcohol. No, Mateo, I'm not going to give you any money, I said flatly. I love you too much to give you any money. No, he yelled, you love me too much, period. His eyes burned with a mixture of anger and frustration. He pinned me to the wall with his left hand as he raised himself up on the balls of his feet, cocked his right hand in a tight, white-knuckled fist. He struggled to keep control, but he finally lost it. The last thing I saw as I closed my eyes was his fist coming at me. I braced myself for the impact, but only felt his fingers graze my cheek as they slammed into the wall a half-inch from my head. I opened my eyes and Mateo burst into tears, his bloody fist repeatedly and reflexively punching the air, and his bloodshot brown eyes overflowing with an agonizing mix of hurt and horror, sorrow and self-loathing. He blinked back his tears as he struggled unsuccessfully to regain control of himself. Go home, he yelled, please, just go home. Shaking uncontrollably, he turned and headed back into the club, disappearing into the darkness. I stood there for a moment, finally able to breathe again, but unable to move, frozen in place against the wall where Mateo had pushed me. For a split second, I considered going after him, but I knew in my heart, just as he knew in his, those days were over. I drove home to the pouring rain, barely able to see the roads ahead of me between the water on my windshield and the tears in my eyes. I had already decided what I was going to do. I'd spent the last year trying to convince someone to love me. I'd spent the 3 years before that trying to convince someone else, and I had failed. There was only one thing to do. I was awakened by the sound of the front door opening and closing, and a familiar voice. I opened my eyes to see the sun filtering through the shades. I realized I was sprawled across my bed, still in my clothes, as I struggled to piece together the events of the previous night. Mateo appeared in the bedroom doorway. Harry, are you all right? I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, unable to answer. He sat next to me and put his hand on my shoulder. I caved at his touch, wrapped my arms around his waist and buried my face in his chest, trembling violently. Without a word, he pulled me close and held me for several minutes. I'm really sorry about what happened, he said finally, and I'm sorry I didn't come home till now. I love you, Harry. I hope you know that, but not like you love me. I can't love you like that. I can't love anyone like that. I just don't have it in me. He paused and I felt his body shift as he reached for something. From the corner of my eye, I saw him pick up an empty plastic pill bottle on the floor. What's this? He asked. Harry, what is this? What did you do? I felt his breathing stop. He pushed me away from his chest, held me tightly at arm's length, and stared at me hard, noticing for the first time just how horrible I looked. The previous night suddenly came flooding back to me. I didn't, I said. I wouldn't. I couldn't. I opened my clenched fist and let 100 white pills cascade to the floor. In his eyes, I saw the reflection of the tender anguish in my own, and we both burst into tears. Violent, broken, ugly, awful tears. Mateo and I parted ways shortly after that. We agreed that it would be best if we saw each other less, for a while at least, until the wounds had healed, his and mine. After he moved out of my house, however, I told him that I couldn't see him at all. I tried to explain that it wasn't something I wanted to do, but something I had to do. It was the only way, I said, that I could ever fall out of love with him. He got mad at me, or he pretended to be mad. Despite what had happened, he still thought of me as the one person in his life he could depend on to always be there for him, to always help him out of all the jams he got himself into. And I think he felt that he had screwed that up for reasons that were beyond his control. He wrote me a letter a few months later, and he confessed that his heart had broken the day I walked away, that he couldn't stop crying. But he said he had come to understand that he wanted me to know that he too had walked away from drinking, from one-night stands, from the awful life he'd been living. He'd returned to his studies and passed his test, and he'd also returned to work. He said that the 220s he'd slipped into the letter were just the beginning. In time, he would repay every penny he had borrowed from me. Even so, he said, he would always owe me so much more. I wept as I read his words. While we were a part of each other's lives, he was never able to tell me what I meant to him. He still tries. He sends me a Christmas card every year, and he calls every so often to apologize over and over again for the way he treated me, for taking me for granted, for never being able to express his appreciation for everything I did for him, and to tell me that he's still haunted by what he did to me one awful night in a bar when he'd had too much to drink, something he can never take back, something that my forgiveness will never undo. But I too am sorry. Sorry that I ever let my judgment become so clouded I would hurt someone who cared so much. Sorry that I didn't recognize that he loved me as best he could, the only way he was able. Sorry, that was never enough. And I'm still haunted by what I did to him one awful night, something that I can never take back, something his forgiveness will never undo. It was a terrible love.
All right, please give it up for Dale Corvino and Bonds and Boundaries.
Hi, everyone. Yes, that's my name, and I'm here at the Bureau. And happy Stonewall Riot Commemoration Month. That's what we call it. That's what we call that here. This is my 10th reading of the month. I've been done for a little while. Because I have a new book out. This is my Rebel Satori title. It's Bonds and Boundaries, a collection of short stories. Because we all need some bonds and we all need some boundaries. And this is my new memoir, which came out May 15th from another publisher, C&R Press. It's called Afterlife of a Kept Boy. You can buy both my titles at the Bureau, and I will sign them for you. And I'm going to read this short story that's in the collection that is a flash piece, because I can get through the whole thing. And also it's kind of sexy, kind of dark. Not dark like Larry, but dark. A little dark. And it's also a New York-centric story. It's set in the Central Park Ramble. Anyone familiar? I think I've seen you there. All right. The story is called... I'll give a Q&A after about the Central Park Ramble. This short story is called The Marielito. I met him in the Central Park Ramble as night relieved the heaviness of summer heat. It was 10:30 by my new Casio. He approached while I was having a smoke in the rustic shelter, fixing on me with his pooled chocolate eyes, pouting, then shyly laying his head upon my shoulder. He said something to me in Spanish, which I didn't catch, so I asked him to repeat it. Pero, ¿qué haces aquí, capitán? What was I doing there? I had stalked the winding paths of the city's wild woodland garden for hours, running into friends under the lamplight, diverging into hideaways here and there. Back then, the ramble by night was our vast, marvelous cruising ground. We'd come from all over the city, on word of mouth, on coded whispers. We didn't have apps to locate each other. We had our noses. We could still ping each other through space, though. Sometimes cops patrolled, but at least it wasn't a data mining operation. This master of the shy pickup took me to his railroad flat in Hell's Kitchen. The narrow space was full of plants, like some greenhouse annex of the park. They ripened the air with oxygen, most welcome after climbing all those stairs, and seemed to spread as I waited by the door while he moved some bags off the bed. When he told me he was from Havana, I asked when he'd arrived. His answer, 1980, prompted me to tell him about my high school obsession with Blondie. I tried to explain the battle between disco and rock, how I'd been called faggot for liking the band, but the story didn't seem to land. He began telling me his story, his passage on the Mariel boat lift, that flotilla of undesirables, reluctantly at first, mainly to put a stop to my nervous chatter. I was sent to prison for falling in love with a classmate. Fausto had the head of a puma, and he loved me back. His mother reported me for corrupting her son. That's what I heard. He was only a little younger than me. His skin was lighter than mine. We say, un jabao lindo. We never did anything but kiss. He kissed me, chastely, to demonstrate their intimacy. He blinked slowly so his long lashes brushed my cheeks. That was our sex. I took his head in my hands, my fingers rummaging through his soft brown curls. I thought we'd kiss again, but he had more to say. The prison was full of homosexuals, Capitan. We remade a whole society for ourselves, one little act of flamboyance at a time. That was our currency. After my release, I heard about the asylum seekers. It was Fausto's uncle who drove me to the Peruvian embassy and bribed the guard. I never saw Fausto again. He slipped from my hold to prepare some tea from his mint plant. We talked until the air shaft glowed with soft dawn and the neighbor turned on her radio. We fucked tenderly, our percussion keeping time with the music, and after, he offered me breakfast. As I took the last bite of toast, dipped in café con leche the way he'd insisted, he whispered to a plant with dark leaves and pink flowers. He caught me looking. I have to catch my breath. She is Adelpha, my faithful companion here. The Cubans say La Yuma, but I prefer the name my Mexican brothers give it, Gringolandia. Over the years, we'd occasionally run into each other in the ramble. He resisted getting a mobile phone, but eventually gave in. His texts were curt and coded. He stopped calling me Capitan. You once reminded me of Ahab in Moby Dick, but not anymore. He'd watched the film as a child at a contraband screening. I did have unruly hair and a beard back then. Instead, he switched to calling me Puma. Puma, do you still have your hair? Puma, I have nothing here but my sorrow. There were days when I thought he was outright mistaking me for Fausto, and others when I thought that his memories of Cuba had fused with those of our first encounter. He sent greetings from his plants, Adelpha and Yerba Buena, among others. He was deeply suspicious of electronic surveillance. He'd explained that during his time under Castro, rewarding denunciations to maintain social cohesion and revolutionary aims was the norm. When I stopped going to the ramble, our cruising ground had lately been swept up by police, plus everyone was starting to cruise online. We kept in touch intermittently. The long hot nights of another summer returned my thoughts to the Marilito, his furrowed brow, his thick hands. I hadn't heard from him in over a year and was seized with a grim thought. Looking up Adelpha in the dictionary, I learned that she is oleander, a common but poisonous shrub. Can cause death if ingested, as in a tea. I texted him but got no response. I headed towards his building, walking briskly through the park, my anxiety mounting. As I approached Columbus Circle, a man in a Parks Department uniform yelled, "Puma, you've gone gray." The Marilito rose from his work in the soil and removed his safari hat. Slick tears coated my cheeks. "Puma, look what they have me doing. I'm nourishing roots. Me," he said, pointing to the mulched soil. "That's lovely," I said. "You look well." "I'm strong, eh, Puma?" He removed his work gloves. "Yes, you fit right in here." He sang out a song I could not follow, which he read in my searching eyes. "I bring abre caminos for your destiny," he half translated. "And how is Adelpha?" "Ah, you know, Puma." I nodded. "She is a bit down, can you imagine? She's jealous of my new life." He wiped my face with his warm hand. "She's always been dramatic, but faithful." Thank you.
All right, next up we have Rebel Satori's own Sven Davison reading from Puck You.
I realize I have to get more people below D in the alphabet, so I have to go with this, right? So I'm going to read a few snippets from my new book, Puck You, which is, so a lot of what we do is reclaiming. Tom and I and Brian and I, the three of us met with the reclaiming of William Burroughs and fever spores, which then led to the friendship, which led to the Library of Homosexual Congress. A lot of my own work is reclaiming folklore, or revisioning it. I think the tagline, one of the taglines in the book is, or memes, as Tom presses me to do, is forging new myths from ancient ore. And of course, you can also get the t-shirt online. And there's free stickers in the back. It's not just a book, it's a movement. All right. And I don't know how to follow everyone that's gone before. So I'm going to try not to be too heavy. I'm going to skip the Nazi bit. This book, so if anyone saw the book that preceded it, it's like almost 600 pages. So I'm like, how do I follow that up with anything? And I had the thought of the book, but I was completely blocked until the day after the election. When the first part of the book came to me, we've always been sort of on the side, so why should this surprise me? And it was finished by the end of the year. So it was kind of like this mad, possessive writing spree. So the first chapter is resistance. We've always been the crone living at the edge of the village or the cave in the woods. Our natural realms are at the fringe. No matter how much our hopes are dashed, we must remind ourselves that this liminal domain is our space, and from whence we draw much of our power. We are the hare in the verge and the rider of the hedge. Our innate stance is resistance. The war against witches, which kind of maybe has a parallel, is often mischaracterized as a war on women. This simplification occludes and obscures the historical fact that eradication of supernatural evil frequently targeted gender transgression of sexual deviance. It was a conflict that focused on difference and turned neighbor against neighbor. The village healer could all too quickly become the evil conjurer sowing deprivation, stealing milk, and cursing livestock. The power to heal meant that the witch also had the power to harm. To deviate sexually was a conspiracy to the devil. The sodomite became sorcerer. The infernal kiss was at the heart of the witch's Sabbath. Buggery is a pact. And I think I couldn't be here without reading Tom's favorite bit. So now we jump from sort of late medieval Tudor and Stuart Europe to maybe 70s, 80s. It's one of the final chapters called In the Dark. In the dark recesses of the world, shadowy back rooms or isolated fens, individuals gather, compelled by the primal and fierce desire that grips them. These meetings occur in places that feel deeply connected to the earth itself, a realm influenced by ancient and elemental forces. Within these hidden locales, a mysterious sort of priesthood emerges, one that seems to be intertwined with the dark essence of the underworld, drawing power from its depths. These individuals, akin to otherworldly beings, partake in an enigmatic ritual that involves consuming a strange sacred substance, a life-giving elixir. Their behavior defies explanation. As if under the influence of a powerful force that transcends normal understanding, their actions, wild and untamed, reflect a connection to something primal and timeless, leaving outsiders baffled by the intensity of their gatherings and the inexplicable bond that unites them. In the witch's eyes, the priest performing these arcane rituals possesses throats resembling deep, shadowy tunnels. Their mouths serve as gates to uncharted passages that delve into the primordial depths of existence. At the very heart of the mystical journey into the unspeakably wicked deep lies the Old Ones, the ancient guardians of the all-powerful wand cloaked in secrets and shadows. Surrounding them, the elder gods stand in their magnificent grandeur, patrons of gold and fire. Their presence is a testament to the divine and the profane. Within this sacred space, fumigated with the incense of sweat and the acrid chemical smell of poppers, lie the keys to enlightenment, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to seek them. In an era reminiscent of the time before history was etched into stone, our temple becomes wherever we are, a fluid sanctuary shaped by our experiences and emotions. We find our kindred spirits in the sultry shadows of New Orleans, gathering upstairs the Phoenix, the Eagle, a place alive with whispers and the past echoes of the present. Here we embrace the dark, united as priests of a fraternal order born from the primordial abyss. Ours is an ancient cultus, instinctually drawn together, devoted to worshiping at the fountain of the white elixir that flows from our very souls. Each ritual we perform, each word we chant binds us further to the mysteries we seek to unlock. We become conduits of ancient knowledge, channeling the energy of ancient races as we delve deeper into the entwined realms of the seen and the unseen. It is in this nexus of darkness and light that we unearth our true purpose, an awakening to the profound truths hidden within the fabric of existence. We are not merely seekers, we are the torchbearers of eternal wisdom, forging a path into the unfathomable night that awaits us. Now, of course, Tom had to read that in front of my mother. And I can't remember how you edited it, but I remember you coming up to me and you'd chosen it, and you're like, I just realized your mother's here and I'm reading something that's absolutely about workshops. And I'll end with another little bit. So I'm always struck by the land acknowledgement that begins each one of these readings. And in my own work, there's often an ancestor acknowledgement, which sort of transcends land. So in Scottish folklore, there's something called the mute or dumb supper. And it came over to the United States with the Scottish immigrants, so it's also something that happens in Appalachia, where people get together in a room with no electricity, no cell phones, and there's no speaking while they eat. And there's a place set for the dead at the table. So this sort of reimagines that as the closing of the book. At the end of the meal, we toast the departed. In conclusion, as we would with any guest, we thank them for joining us and wish them safe travels back to their abodes. As with the repast, when we share our abundance here, we do so with our brothers, both living and dead. It is a time to remember the vital role played by those who walk the path ahead of us. In addition to those we know, it is also important to remember those we do not. We lost a generation of gay men to the Holocaust, the AIDS epidemic, We can also welcome these unknown and to us unnamed in our remembrance. As the old saying goes, that which is remembered lives. Then I have a plug for the Library of Homosexual Congress and how important that work is, which is heartfelt and honest. And then of course, more recently, we've lost almost 50 million people globally to COVID-19 and the aftermath. Our own Pagan Grove in New Orleans lost one of our brothers in the first month of the epidemic. I've also lost brothers to suicide and substance abuse, probably more than natural causes. And of course, gay youth are more likely to commit suicide, unfortunately, than their counterparts. And my ancestral shrine, it has far too many familiar faces lost too soon. And of course, the Nazi Holocaust took out a tremendous number as well. And when I was young, this is one particular memory that I want. When I was young, Charlie Howard was murdered in nearby Bangor, Maine, which is about an hour from where I grew up. Howard was a 23-year-old man who tragically lost his life in a hate crime on July 7th, 1984. While walking with his boyfriend, Roy Ogden, Howard was attacked by 3 teenagers who harassed and assaulted him for being gay. The attackers threw him over the State Street Bridge into the Dustgate stream, despite his pleas that he couldn't swim. And mind you, this is a shallow stream of the water rocks, and it's about a 15-foot drop. He drowned while his boyfriend managed to escape and call for help. At the time, many in the state blamed the victim. Some claimed he incited it by flirting with the teenagers. And the homosexual panic defense, not surprisingly, was used during his defense, their defense, there's 3 of them. And the perpetrators were charged with manslaughter and tried as juveniles. So they were all out by the time they were 18. And at least one of the assailants was a friend of people that I went to high school with who were friends of mine, who defended the killing as being justified because he asked for it. In high school, I often had young men yelling at me down the hallway, "I hope you know how to swim." And to this day, the State Street Bridge is still nicknamed by some the Chuckahomo Bridge. People use it for directions. Go left after the Chuckahomo Bridge. This tragic event galvanized the Bangor queer community and led to the formation of the Maine Lesbian Gay Political Alliance, which later became Equality Maine, which later passed it was the first people's referendum on gay marriage that was successful. That was not turning over, just having to do with a court decision, or it was a grassroots campaign that actually did it. Now a monument stands to Howard at the Condustic stream, and Howard's story inspired Stephen King to include it in it, so he got a little bit of posthumous fame, I guess. In the modern world, we have a collective amnesia. History, at best, is what happened yesterday, not 40 years ago, let alone 1500. Our ancestors are more the near-forgotten prologue. They flow with us, echoes in time, and the genes of ourselves. We may feel a justified sense of obligation. Cemeteries are filled with the forgotten. How many of our gay elders lie beneath the ground at New York's Hard Island? As my great aunt, known to the family as Uppy, lesbian novelist in the 40s and 50s, wrote in a 1932 sapphic series of love sonnets. The rocks will never miss you, nor the sky. The sea will be unchanging, oh my dear. Tomorrow by this water only I, of all things else, shall know that you are not here. When we remember the dead, we honor both them and the ongoing solidarity of brotherhood. Like the birch, new life springs in the aftermath of devastating loss. Aren't there? A little heavy at the end.
Please welcome Scott Hightower, Imperative to Spare Poems.
Thank you, Donnie's sweetheart. He's always kind to me. I'm reading 5 poems, so it's not a big shot. There's a film I like called The Single Man. It's about a gentleman who loses his husband in an accident. He's kind of trying to find a way to stay alive for another day. It's mentioned in this poem. It's called When George Smells a Little Dog. There's an epigraph of Jean-Paul Sartre that says, "Life has no meaning the moment you lose the illusion of being eternal." I was not sure I could handle viewing A Single Man, but I watched it last night, twice. Lots of scenes gave me pause. In particular, I wanted the one where George smells a little dog to go on forever. I have my fears of going under, my tough moments. Some nights are rougher than others. The past is my present business, and perhaps to some degree, living in the past is my future. I have a tiny clutch of loving and loyal friends, napping with the gun, my gun, in their hands. And still, I haven't met a dog I could live without. The pursuit of happiness. Now, this mentions Hecuba. Hecuba was the queen of Troy, loses her husband, so she's a queen, a widowed queen. And in the end, one of the stories, it's not a very happy ending. She's loses her mind, and so the gods have mercy on her, turning into a dog, and she leaps off of a cliff and dies that way. So it's kind of a tragic ending. She's just a character. The pursuit of happiness. Your tributes are earned and deserved. That said, the high-ups review only affirms what I already know. Do they know that you sleep commando? Do they smile back at you when you look into the mirror after your morning shower? The reflection of self-possession is a fluid thing. Sometimes gratitude fulminates in the wisdom and tenderness of another's gaze. Goya's Maha Denuda comes to mind. Legend has it that Madame de Gaulle's accent once led journalists to misrepresent her answer when asked the secret basis of the satisfaction of one's life: happiness. I am not without my own private well of happiness. I am struggling with the cruelty of resolve. You cannot change a leopard's spots or zebra's stripes. Amazingly, I have a vast inner field of peace on which I hope one day to build a new palace. I still want to wine and dine my friends there. I should have liked to have had Madame de Gaulle for tea. I am no Hecuba. I like dogs, but I don't want to be one. Working on a new collection. It's called Lord of the Swamp. It's a little bit like Animal Farm and a French satire and there's an orange pig at the center of it. That tells you what's going on. This is called Fire and Fury. Enough said, right? Fire and Fury. Orange pig, like Lazarus, comes, goes, gets a spray tan, comes again, spray tan in chief. Likes pimento cheese. One season, though known to be penurious, he hired a small army of independent contractors to come to the farm and shovel manure across the fields. He neither fed them well nor contracted them any transport home. As he never reads, he assumed someone said something to him. We assumed someone said something to him. People came from nearby places and gazed across our fences at the muzzle velocity marine snow and said they could do so much better than that incompetent and reckless spray tan super spreader. The demise of tyranny. This is the last point of the manuscript. Predators' instincts are ruthless until the end. And in the end, their instincts. Most reject Russian roulette, are also most always cowards. Some, without the comfort of one of their minions or children, joylessly bite the hospitably reserved revolver or the certitudinal cyanide backup. A few finally, hurriedly, coiffed and coutured, sprawl at their desk, on a sofa or on the floor without a pillow or blanket. What one does not want is to be hanged with one's mistress and some lip spittle in some piddling filling station, and then to have one's corpses reviled and festively photographed like a spent pinata or gas station sushi. That's from my book. Copies out here if you're interested. This is a retelling of the Good Samaritan. It's called View from the Ditch. The last one I'm going to read today. Thanks for being here. And you too. There's that. We're online too. So you too. View from the Ditch. It's nice to have dominion over serpents and scorpions, to live with another set of eyes, to trust nothing by any means shall hurt you, life's possibilities and mysteries, to be petted and to pet. Jesus in Luke, who is my neighbor? And before that, Leviticus, how shall the stranger be treated? The sojourner fallen among thieves, the man in pain. Empathetically, the Samaritan's view reaches toward the man in pain. The view from the bottom of the ditch where the dog shits. Why flaunt your good blessings? Why bother to cast aspersions on those whose wings are clipped, no fault of their own? Twice passed by on the other side. Rock bottom, surmised as being a kind of self-indulgence. The Samaritan goes to the fallen sojourner and bestows him mercy. What's mine is yours, if you have need of it. My safety is yours, if you have need of it. Let's talk about the best.
So this is my last chance on the mic today. And I just wanted to say thank you all for everything, for your gifts of the years. We've been remembering Felice Picano and Edmund White. Thank you. Douglas Sadamic will read from the forthcoming reprint of Sacred Lips of the Bronx. Please welcome Douglas.
introduced me to Evoke Felice. Felice has been a important part of my journey, actually. He was kind of like my dad in Los Angeles. I met him in New York. I wanted just to thank Tom and Sven for doing this profound work of bringing these OG gay authors together, kind of in the tradition of Michael Dennedy and David Groff and Felice Bacano, who, as you know, was a legendary writer, but also a publisher and editor. So it's just so great because it's so easy, to dissociate, to forget about all the hard work of the people who've gone before us, to keep them alive. I'm actually living in Los Angeles. I came here to be here with you, and obviously to come back and enjoy the energy and the victory around the mayoral victory we just had here, which is so hopeful in a really, really dark time. So how cool to be here right now. It's like, born from the Bronx and never, gets out of Penn Station. It's like, oh, I'm home. There's like 10 million people I'm gonna bump into. I mean, not that I know them, but some I know from a long time ago. Times Square back in the day when you were 16 years old, which is a very long time ago, is not what it is today. This book is called Sacred Lips of the Bronx, but actually it's really about a time like today. It's really about AIDS in Los Angeles. And I think this is before we even knew we could take the HIV test. It was a very dark time. It was involved in AIDS activism in Los Angeles. I had no idea this might be actually my farewell book to writing, because while I was writing this, which was partly in New York, partly in Los Angeles, little birdie sat on my shoulder and said, some of this trauma that some of the beautiful writers here were evoking, as an activist, what are you gonna fucking do about it? Well, maybe you should go to therapy. Jewish? Oh, Freud, yeah, I've read Freud, but therapy. No, go to therapy, Joe. Find a gay-centered therapist. There was like one or two. And then become yourself a psychologist. Go to school, get training. I founded the nation's first LGBT specialization, clinical psychology, colors LGBTQ youth. There's a whole kind of world in Los Angeles that predates Stonewall that has to do with the origins of the Mattachine Society, the Radical Fairy. So it was in that fertile territory that a gay-centered psychological awareness could develop. When I started becoming in my 60s, I realized I had to go back to writing, and I went to Felice and I said, there's all these manuscripts that are a mess, you have to help me. And he said, no problem, Doug, I've been waiting for 30 years. So he did, before he died, I videotaped him, and those videotapes, there's about 40 hours of them. Hopefully somebody will help me put them together, but he helped me write this, which is Healing Gay Sex and Love, a Group Experience. It's actually out for pre-order, and then a few other books that will come out too. So I'm gonna read this interesting, very spicy. I don't know that I would have written it now, but you can see, if I get to it at the end, where the psychological idea of how the God image changes from the heterosexist Yahweh to something much more homo. But let's see if I might have lost the space. Come on, Doug. There's that moment where, oh yeah, I found it. Got some water here. Behind you. All right. So, I think you've been prepared by some very, very, X-rated authors to do this. It's a little also racial. But, I know, blah, blah, blah. Because there's a crisis in Los Angeles and a loss of meaning, like, what the fuck? It's like, why is everybody done? What's the point of life? I went to the Bronx where the first stirrings of homosexual intensity ignited, and that's why I called it Sacred Lips of the Bronx. So we go back and forth between Los Angeles and this teenage love affair between Hector and Michael. Upstairs at his 3-room apartment, 2 subway stops away, his mother looked a lot like mine. She balanced an unlit cigarette in her tight, cracked lips. She was a compact woman with a youthful urgency and light brown, discolored skin like Hector's. Hector and I sat on the orange and white Formica kitchen table, covered in peach-colored plastic placemats, She served us espresso with little cubes of sugar iced yellow cake on a paper plate. Hector. He goes with his abuela to church, he told his mother, who nodded. Very nice, she said, like she couldn't be bothered. Then she left the kitchen. Hector. Jew. Michael. PR. We both drank our coffees. In his room a few minutes later, the plaster cracked walls were covered with pictures of Jesus and Joe Namath and Roger Daltrey and some Latin-looking keyboard player I didn't recognize. There were Catholic comic books and neatly written homework assignments on white, loosely paper piled over 11th grade textbooks and ratty spiral notebooks. He showed me some drawings in his homework, pieces of paper on which bold A's and B's had been inscribed in red ink. I was conscious of him watching me. There were more tours. I was conscious of Hector shutting his bedroom door with the help of his flat back. After some additional tours of stacks of Sports Illustrated and assorted seashells collected from the clean beaches of Puerto Rico, he pushed me by accident. I fell onto his linoleum floor, which smelled of Mr. Clean. By accident, he did too. He lay his thin marionette arms casually over mine. It was more of a slow, motionless cascade. I was conscious of his fingertips, searching for my skin like the feet of an upside-down insect, scrambling for the ground. What did you call me? He asked, making believe he was holding me down against my will. He held my fingers too tightly. What did you call me? I asked back. And although I felt the breath from his mouth pressing on my neck, and though I heard the words, I called you a Jew, Jew, I didn't dare let myself give in to him for fear that he would tell his friends. I stayed still in one rigid posture, my body unable to rest itself on the floor, and taking this curious predicament. Instead, I focused on the shock of a wish that was no longer just deferred, in the sense that Hector's moist breath on my neck may have meant one thing to me and a different thing to him. It was a new place, just as Shul and the porn theater had been new, and sensing this, I felt my neck release itself fully into the gravity of his tiny room. We lay there for a few minutes. Some strands of oily black hair rested in my face. It made my nose itch, but I didn't dare move to scratch it, and nothing happened. The world of men had before been a mix of tactile boredom leading up to shattering appetites now. The smell of skin and a hint of mutual loneliness. Had all this been ordained by the forces of a Bronx in flux? The thud of a basketball, the cracked voice of a rabbi? I heard the thud in my head, and it hurt. It was a way of staying focused on the immediate problem. Now what? To my right, I saw his bed frame and the dust balls beneath it. To my left was the bedroom door against which his sneakered feet were jimmied. I saw a wild look of despair in his eyes. You like it? He asked, his voice shaking, his eyes dark with shame. I don't know. I whispered, amazed to find myself unable to talk. My lips moved, but no words came out. I found myself uncontrollably, imperceptibly caressing the skin in between his t-shirt and the black leather belt holding up his shorts. I felt goosebumps trailing up and down his side where my fingers were. What the fuck do you do in that church? He asked me, speaking into my neck through the sweaty tangles of black split ends. The same thing you do in yours. Nah, he said, starting to stir. He shifted his weight and pushed his face away from my neck in a jolting arc. Heading upward, he propped his left elbow up on the floor and balanced the left side of his face on it. It was clumsy, but fast and effective, like the way he dribbled a basketball. When he was done, his lips were positioned maybe 1.5 feet from mine. What do you do in there? He asked, staring. I understood he thought I carried magic amulets in my pocket, that I drummed up spells to make him follow me. He thought I was a demon, just as Frida, the grandmother who was about to die, taught me to believe that he was once one too. We pray for you, Pierce, to go away. He smacked my face. Well, we ain't going nowhere. The blow was not unexpected. My face stung in a million places, even though he had not hit me hard. His soft palm really just dusted the right side of my profile. I'd never been slapped like that, a dusting. I would have wrested myself from his grasp, except that suddenly my hands had been freed. You learn things sometimes by learning and not thinking. Like a witch sensing her magic in old age, or a rabbi closing his eyes and seeing the end of history and the beginning of something new, and twisted, I smacked him back, mimicking the action of the palm touching his right profile, much in the way you pat a dog's back. He clenched his lips when I said, we pray for you, Pierce, to drop dead. He smacked me again, saying nothing. I hit him again, not too hard, but hard enough. He made a sound like he lost balance and fell a little to his side. Woof, he said, scratching an eye. When he regained his position, he made a scrambling motion with his bony legs that said with a certain unspoken insolence, "Move your legs." I did, making a V shape. I felt his crotch sink into mine. "We want you Jews to drop dead," he said. This time he used a lighter touch, more of a brush than a smack. "Then this place would really be a dump," I said, copying his style, but hitting the opposite side of his face. With a different hand, I had 2 hands free, he only had one. His breath began to quicken, his eyes moved about in their sockets, little blood-shot marbles inset in Indian sockets. He said the way he bit his lip and allowed himself to slide into this new person now made him seem surreal. As I had seen Frida, the grandmother, in the street after prayers at her synagogue, I was aroused. I moved myself away from my sharp zipper, inserting a quick hand in my pants. I knew he knew what was going on. He lifted his weight up and allowed his eyes to scan down to my crotch, seemingly blasé, the way he would look when a basketball circled around the hoop a dozen times, before it eventually shook itself through. Then he buried his face again in my neck so that I couldn't see his lips. His voice was muffled. He was afraid to say it, faggot. He pressed down hard on the word. I haven't heard trying to say that word. There have been moments in synagogue when I felt I would feel tortured out of it. Mr. Bluestein was incontinent. Mrs. Levine gave me the evil eye. At such times, a prayer would seize up on my lips, and I would find myself entertaining a strong impulse to murder them. If I really went with the prayer to the next step, a repetition, a deep-throated tremor, a humble, riddled love of my people might then flood over me. Strange, a simple prayer calling up an agonizing river of contradictions. "I hate the way you Jews pray," he said. "I hate the way you PRs pray." And then a blackout, him grabbing me on my back, my fingertips on his wet, bony neck, his crotch swirling in place, above mine like a hard and furious flapping of wings. Was it the angel of death beating off? And then when the light came back, a buckling of youthful abandon, a curl in the torso, the neck's ready to crack out of line, pants stayed on, half on, shirt shriveled up, half off, spitting by the lips, some saliva sputtering. From a hurried kiss, you could confuse with a spit what was going on. 2 kids rubbing against each other. This time there was no underwear in the way, no escaping the fact. Still so fast, salty and strange, tasting the sweat produced by disguised rapture. So at the end of that little section, he leaves, he goes home. Next day, his grandmother's beloved Jewish grandmother dies. He's going to come back in more kind of magical realist terms. So he's by himself with a dead body, the grandmother thinking about everything, reflecting, loud voices of the Bronx outside. I wanted to say a prayer over the dead body, anything, Frida's name, call my mother, or Hector's name. Yesterday, all of that would have been second nature. No. I looked at the filthy glass and saw a reflection on my face. The place where Hector had hit. In a minute, it would be time to call my mother. For now, I looked out the window. I saw 2 different versions of the Bronx. The scene outside Frida's window and the spot on my face Hector had dusted with his hand. At one point, if I squinted hard, I could see both at once.
Okay, we're down to our final reader, Charlie Vasquez. We'll be reading from Fever Spores, The Queer Reclamation of William S. Burroughs, which is co-edited by Brian Alessandro and Tom Cardinal.
Hello. Well, I was like, I found part A and a part B to read from because it's long. And as I was listening back there, I thought, well, find the lighter of the two. But being that it's about William Burroughs, you guys are screwed, in other words. So a few years ago, Tom Cardamone and Sven reached out and said, we're putting together an anthology about William Burroughs. And we want queer writers to sort of write essays in this sort of reclamatory style. So just to set up for the piece, I'm going to read from the end of the piece, but the piece is called Junkies. And it more or less covers my discovering William Burroughs when I was about 19. I had just moved to the West Coast from the Bronx to Portland, Oregon specifically. I was hanging out with all the wrong people as a young musician. And one of the guys who I was in love with, his girlfriend turned me on to William Burroughs, but she wouldn't let me borrow the books because she was paranoid. She was a drug addict. So I went to the library, and the first book that I sat down with, not knowing that it was his debut novel, was Junkie. And it gave me a glimpse into the secret life that my father lived when I was a kid. I kind of found out about that later on. So it was through William Burroughs that I kind of got to understand this weird subculture that my dad sort of inhabited. This part that I'm reading from is many, many years later. When I returned to Portland after living in Mexico and allowed myself to basically hit rock bottom without using needles. So that's the setup. Mark was still working at the bar when I returned to Portland in fall of 2004. The barback stopped to introduce himself as I was having a beer one evening, a tall and handsome fellow with blonde hair and farm boy looks, which was never my thing. His grin inspired me to consider otherwise. Intelligence shone intensely in his gaze, the ultimate turn-on. He rested the lip of his bus sub onto the leather belt holding his Levi's up before wiping his hand on his towel and holding it out. "You're the writer he's always talking about," he said, the stink of bleach thrilling me. "I'm Bill, it's great to meet you." A darker truth awaited discovery beneath his wholesome veneer, though his confessing to admiring experimental literature and film should have sounded the alarm. Perhaps I was too distracted. Maybe I was wondering why blonde guys had yet to turn me on. "What do you write?" Bill asked. "Well, I've been working on a clown character," I told him. "Really?" he said, lighting a cigarette. "Not just any clown," I added, "a fetish one." We talked about writers we liked, and the beats came up as happened. Bill preferred Ginsberg to Burroughs and Kerouac, but I wasn't ready to shoo him away quite yet. He mentioned a poetry manuscript he'd been working on, and infatuation was born. As I'd hoped, it happened one day. "We should hang out," Bill said with a smirk while lighting a cigarette at the bar. "My treat, my place." "Cool," I said. "In case you're wondering," he said, "I'm not gay." Bill picked me up when the day arrived. He kept his eyes fixed on the road as we drove into the twilight of Oregon dusk in autumn. I tried not to stare at him, though it became impossible to not see his legs in the periphery, which looked strong beneath denim. Veins bulged along his forearms whenever he gripped the steering wheel to take on a turn. "We can't go to my place," he said, averting his eyes. "Well, mine is fine," I said, "as long as you're not afraid of spiders." "Can I ask you something?" Bill asked. "Sure. Will you do something with me?" "What do you have in mind?" "Just some heroin." Here we go again, I thought. What if you get high and come on to him like those other guys? What if you get pulled over while in possession? "Don't do it, Charlie," the voice of my consciousness said. "Fuck yeah, I'll do it with you," I said. Bill parked on a dead-end street. "Wait here," he said. I lit a cigarette as he scaled a 10-foot fence separating the end of the road from a grassy hill dropping to the highway. He landed on the other side like a ninja, vanishing into the evening. The scent of fallen leaves and burning fireplaces electrified the air. Bill plopped down next to me 10 minutes later and locked the driver's seat door, securing his seatbelt. "I've been waiting to do this for a long time," he said. "Heroin?" I asked. "Can I read you something after we do it?" "Whatever you want." We entered the basement I was crashing in after I'd arrived broke from Mexico, sneaking in as to not be heard. The hens in the backyard started shrieking in terror as soon as we sat down, my roommate scrambling outside from his bedroom upstairs. The surprise made it hard to relax, and I got up to investigate. A family of raccoons had attacked them, as I'd later learned. "Come here," Bill said. He set his poetry journal aside and spread his legs, the light in his eyes glinting with the prospect of pleasure. I sat next to him as he fumbled through his pockets, my heart pounding when I caught a whiff of his sweaty hair. The thought of letting his guard down once we got high filled me with hope, but also with dread, yet another adrenaline rush. My roommate had calmed the chickens in back finally. I stuck Bowie station to station into the CD player, wondering what would happen. The piece of night hummed. In the hours to come, I'd awaken to another day of selling vibrators and leather harnesses and poppers at Spartacus Leathers. Well, Bill said, I don't want to let you down. What do you mean, I asked. He parted his poetry journal as if preparing to read from it. Then he removed the ballpoint pen from the pages, pulling the ink tube out. He snapped the cylinder in half and gave me a piece. That's how I do it too, I told him. Cool, he said, preparing it. You know what I love when I'm high, he asked. What? A slow, wet blowjob. Okay. He spread his legs in anticipation while firing up the sauce in the spoon. Once it cooled, he snorted half through each nostril, throwing his head back when it burned. I took the works and cooked up my bit as station to station raged on in the squalor. My nasal passages caught fire when I snorted my share, my limbs going heavy when the warm feeling spread. Bill got up and stumbled to my bed after a while, where he collapsed face up to stare at the spider webs dotting the ceiling beams in decay. Come here, he said, unzipping. I fell next to him, the smell of sweaty hair closer. You can suck it now, he said. All right. Well, he said after some moments passed. I can't move, I said. Damn, Bill said, but doesn't this feel great? You never read me a poem, I said, as station to station started over after reaching the end. I melted into the mattress as he lay like a corpse beside me, his hands folded over by his zipper, his eyes closed. The thought of pleasing him was more entertaining than the effort required to do it by then. He lay still for hours as if contemplating a ceasefire with his demons, neither smiling nor scowling, just heavy under the weight of an ocean. And then he left. I wondered about his silence as the CD looped over from the beginning, what drove him to seek the mirages of intoxicating substances, since I knew why I did. My father's heartbreak became clearer with time. Burroughs' torments still jump off the pages whenever I revisit his earliest work. The clues to the murder camouflaged in the crime scene, the motive never found. If the primary cause of addiction can be traced to trauma, then we're all junkies. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming out. We have books that were read from today and some that weren't read from. So please check those out. Thanks.